Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got an expensive story out of the Detroit Free Press, the paper I delivered as a young man. Ford could face $1 billion federal penalty after a years-long dispute over the Transit Connect vans. Phoebe Wall-Howard wrote this. She's a wonderful reporter at the Free Press. She's the one who did the big expose about the dual-clutch transmissions. And now she's talking about Ford and a possible $1 billion penalty they may have to pay. They could face up to $1.3 billion in import penalties on its Ford Transit Connect vans, according to a document they filed with the SEC last week. This is on top of a $196 million penalty they paid in 2020 to U.S. Customs and Border Protection related to the Transit Connect, and that's all been confirmed to the Free Press by the company. The payment was treated as a special item in Ford financial documents. So a lot of this information, people ask, how they discover this? Well, it turns out that corporations have to file paperwork, and the paperwork often contains little nuggets like this, such as the special item of $196 million paid to the U.S. CBP. The legal battle is part of a years-long tariff dispute in U.S. courts between Ford and federal customs officials that seem to be coming to a close with potentially painful consequences for Ford. The tariffs involve the Transit Connect vehicles used as cargo vans by their customers. If the vans are purchased as passenger vans, they're subject to a 2.5% tax. If they're cargo vans, they are 25% duty. So there's a difference there of 10 times. So you'd like them to come in as passenger vans because it's a much, much lesser charge. So Ford spokesperson Ian Thibodeau told the Free Press on Thursday, the Transit Connect program was designed and executed to comply with long-standing tariff rules. Nonetheless, after the Supreme Court declined to rehear the case, Ford paid increased duties on vehicles that had previously been imported to the U.S., plus interest. We will rightly continue to vigorously defend Ford's actions here and contest any additional duties and penalty. Of course, their vigorous defense going forward, well, they've already lost at the Supreme Court, so, they'll have to fight another battlefield someplace else. Ford is accused of strategically trying to get around tariff laws. Now, the latest Ford filing with the federal regulatory agency is called a pre-penalty notice that alerts investors to the financial vulnerability. The vans in question were built in Turkey. I only laugh because I did not know that Ford built vehicles in Turkey these days. Now, after the company's June 30th quarterly earnings period ended, Ford filed documents that noted the customs agency ruled in 2013 that Transit Connects imported as passenger wagons and later converted into cargo vans are subject to the 25% duty applicable to cargo vehicles rather than the 2.5% on passenger vehicles. So this is something that reared its ugly head 8 years ago. But, of course, it wound up in court, where everything goes into slow motion. Ford challenged the ruling in the U.S. Court of International Trade, which, trust me, that sounds like a party, which ruled in Ford's favor in August 2017. So things are going good. But then Customs appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit and prevailed in June of 2019. The U.S. Supreme Court denied to hear their petition in June, and the company paid increased duties for certain prior imports plus interest and disclosed to investors that CBP might push for penalties on top of that. On Thursday, Ford said in its regulatory filing that its pre-penalty notice includes a demand for additional duties of $181 million and indicates that CBP is contemplating the issuance of a claim for a monetary penalty. If such a claim is brought, CBP indicated the penalty it may seek could be as much as $652 million up to $1.3 billion. $1.3 billion. In the event a penalty is ultimately imposed against us, referring to Ford, the amount would be based on our level of culpability as determined by the courts. We intend to vigorously defend our actions and contest payment of any amount set forth in the pre-penalty notice. And of course, if I had to guess, they'll negotiate this because no one wants us to go to trial. It could go either way, and no one knows which way it might go. So settle it. Now, the U.S. Justice Department determined that Ford designed, marketed, sold, and delivered the van to consumers exclusively as a two-person cargo van. But to avoid the higher rate of duty, petitioner imported each Transit Connect with a temporary, cheap rear seat that was designed to be immediately removed as soon as the van cleared customs. And the real question, it all boils down to, is what is the van designed to do? Because the law says that you can avoid the higher duty if the van is principally designed for passenger transport. Is it principally designed for passenger transport? So Ford says, look, we bring these things in. They've got seats for passengers. And then if, they get removed later on, that's a different story altogether, but they do have the seats there. And the government says, well, the seats lacked head restraints. They were upholstered with cost-reduced fabric that did not match the front seats. But Ford argued the rear passenger seat met all federal safety standards, had seat belts for every seating position, and anchors for the rear seats, and seat belts, and were street-legal passenger vehicles. So, depends on what your interpretation of principally designed means. So, by the way, in case you're curious, and many of you already know this, the 25% tariff stems from what's called the chicken tax. The chicken tax. Years ago, 1963, years ago, the government got in a little squabble with some countries in Europe and elsewhere, and fighting over who was importing what, where, at what cost. And somebody at some point accused American industry of shipping chickens to Europe and claimed they were being dumped on the markets for below cost in an attempt to harm other chicken producers in other countries. So other countries said, if you do that, we're going to put a tax on your chickens. And then we said, okay, fine, we're going to put a tax on some of your stuff. And it was a small group of things that happened at that time. There have been other tariff battles in American history. But this one became famous because it got called the chicken tax. And of course, that's comical. Anything involving chickens is funny. So, since the creation of the chicken tax in 1963, automakers have been finding ways to get around the 25% tariff on imported trucks, said the vice president of global vehicle forecasting. Toyota began putting beds on imported incomplete pickup trucks in the early 1970s, making the final assembly of the vehicle in the U.S. Other companies have followed, including van producers who import vans with seats and windows, which makes them passenger cars. And the one I remember was a Subaru Brat. A friend of mine had one in high school. The Subaru Brat was this weird little vehicle that it looked like a pickup truck, a small pickup truck. But it had two rear-facing seats that were bolted to the bed in the back, which I don't think in my entire life saw anybody sitting in. But by putting those two extra seats back there, facing the wrong direction, out in the elements, they said, oh no, it's a passenger vehicle, it's not a truck. In the past, Nissan fought the tariff on two-door SUVs, which it argued were passenger cars, but the government treated them as trucks. Nissan won that redesignation of the two-door Pathfinder and other two-door SUVs as passenger cars alongside their four-door counterparts. So here's the thing. This rule about what it's principally designed for is open to interpretation. And so Ford, I'm sure, is going to say, well, it's a $1 billion interpretation issue here. So if Ford were to fight this and lose, Ford, Stellantis, and Daimler would all be subject to retroactive tariffs of hundreds of millions of dollars. And again, this is the expert speaking. Ford's volume makes them the perfect first target for the SEC. Ford also already plans to make the next generation Transit Connect in North America. Daimler started local assembly of the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter back in 2018, but the Ram ProMaster City is still being imported from Europe, and current plans have it remaining in Europe, according to Fiorani. And again, Fiorani was the guy who is the vice president of global vehicle forecasting at Auto Forecast Solutions. Thibodeau told the Free Press, we don't typically comment on future product plans. So that's Ford saying we're not going to get into where we're going to build cars in the future. But getting back to the Subaru Brat, the U.S. and Canada version had carpeting and a welded-in rear-facing set of jump seats in the cargo area. These were a tariff avoidance ploy, with the plastic seats in the cargo bed allowing Subaru to classify the Brat as a passenger car instead of a light truck. They were discontinued after the 1986 model year. And I'm surprised they made them that long. Now, if you look up chicken tax on the internet, you'll see all kinds of discussion about this, but they'll point out that the reason the chicken tax was invented was to give U.S. domestic automakers an advantage over imported competitors. But of course, the chicken tax being created in 1963 never anticipated that Ford might be building its vehicles in Turkey and importing them to the U.S. And so that's the global economy that we have now that no one anticipated in 1963. So there is the ultimate irony here that Ford is being penalized, potentially, for bringing these vehicles into the United States and misclassifying them. And it's all being done and fought over a rule that was put in place to protect them, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, back in the day from companies overseas shipping their stuff to America. So that's where we are. And many other people have pointed out the idiocy of the chicken tax. And I know Jalopnik's written quite a bit about this, the chicken tax. And it's strange, and it's surprising it's still there. But anything involving taxes, if it brings in money, it's kind of hard to get that stuff rewritten. So great story by Phoebe Wall-Howard. We'll see what happens. The Detroit Free Press published it, of course. Ford could face $1 billion federal penalty after years-long dispute over the Transit Connect vans. It was sent to me by Thomas, Jason, and Keith. Thanks a lot, guys. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. The person who invented knock-knock jokes perhaps deserves a Nobel Prize.